I will get to your questions in the chat, and for those in the chat, feel free, have at it, start asking those questions. I will get to them. I am going to start off with some questions asked ahead of time, though. Oh, I forgot to mention this. I always mention this at the beginning of these streams. As is per tradition here in the Inner Circle, I always like to, at the very end of the stream, we will announce what the next Jazz Standards Club study is going to be for the month of April. Okay, so stick around to the very end of the stream. I will announce what the tune is going to be, right? Okay, I've had a lot of fun with Love for Sale, right? And so that's been a lot of fun. Okay, this one is from Benzabang. Question is, we spend a lot of time on the moving chords, 3, 6, 1, 4, 5, etc. But what are great thought approaches to playing where we sit on the major seventh or the dominant seventh or the minor seventh chord for 2 to 3 bars? Yeah. I can actually leave that up on the screen for now. That's a really good question. So whenever we have a static chord, this is true. It's kind of funny because like I feel like in other styles of music, like I'm thinking about rock, obviously there's different styles of rock, but in general, when we're talking about improvising, chords tend to last a lot longer than in jazz, right? In jazz, they seem to be going by every two beats, or even every bar, really. So what happens when, a great example would be, the rhythm changes, right? Let me back up just a little bit so the guitar players don't go crazy if they can't see my hands. The rhythm changes, right? So we got, just like 2 bars of D7, G7, right? Then C7, then F7 for 2 bars, right? So it's basically like these dominant 7th chords that go on for 2 bars. Okay, so that's a lot of time and space when you're used to like quote unquote playing the changes. Others of you are like playing the changes. I wish I could do that. There's a lot of different approaches, right? And so the first approach, and I think it's a totally fair and totally fine approach. Obviously, I'll talk about its limitations in a second. But that would be like just thinking about scales, right? And there's nothing, by the way, sometimes in the jazz world, there can be this kind of strange little pretentious thing about scales where it's like, I'll teach you the scales to play over this, but don't play the scales, right? Well, yes and no, right? Scales are a totally fine way, especially for this context, to get started in thinking about these chords, right? So if I have a dominant 7th chord, like a D7, right? Well, a dominant 7th chord, the Lydian mode, right, is going to be very appropriate for this particular chord, right? Right, so that's going to really outline the sound of that dominant 7th, right? So being able to play the Lydian mode is a great one to start with there. If it's a major chord, the Ionian mode or the major scale. Now, if it's a minor 7th chord, I'm going to go to the key of C major, really. So we're going to play a D minor, right? Something about tunes like So What, or Impressions, right? Where those are modal tunes, right? So you're really thinking about modes there. So, we're talking about a minor 7th chord and it's lasting for, a long period of time, right? Well, we can think Dorian, and Dorian oftentimes, right, which is this. Dorian is oftentimes the sound in jazz, whether it's a 2 chord or whether it's a modal 1 chord that we're thinking about, right? And so when I think about Dorian, like I'm having a D minor here, like, and I'm just sitting on a D minor for a long time. Well, Dorian is the 2nd mode of the major scale, which means that what major scale is D the 2nd note of, or the 2nd tone of? That'd be the C major scale. So if I'm landing on this D minor for a long time, well, I can use the C major scale or the Dorian mode as my playground. Right? All that stuff is fair game, right? Right, all that is fair game for playing over top of a static minor 7th chord, right? And in the same way, you can kind of think about that with Lydian too, right? So let's go back to the rhythm changes example that I was talking about, those cycling and fourths, dominant 7th chords, right? So D7, right? So Lydian is the 5th mode of the major scale, right? So if mixed Lydian is the fifth note of the major scale, then what major scale is D the fifth tone of, right? Well, that's the G major scale, right? So in a lot of ways, right? All of those major ideas, those G major ideas, work great over top of that D7. So if that helps you think about that, right, then scales are totally a great way. So that's kind of like approach number one. Okay, so let's call it scales and modes, right? That's a great way to start thinking about things. I think there's a little bit of a mention of something else in the. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. No, I thought there was another part of the question there. So the approach number two is licks, right? Licks and ideas. There's a chapter. So in the Jazz Standards Playbook Volume 1, which all of you guys have access to, right, in your Inner Circle membership, the chapter on Have You Met Miss Jones? Sweet Georgia Brown. Sweet Georgia Brown actually deals with this, right? Because Sweet Georgia Brown is just like, lots of dominant seventh chords, again, just being played for a very long time. And so where scales are going to fall short every single time is the authentic jazz language portion of it, because scales are going to tell you what notes you can play. Like there's a lot of notes you can play, and ultimately you can play the chromatic scale as long as you're connecting those scale tones correctly, right? And especially if you're resolving those chromatic notes to chord tones, right? Super important. But they're going to miss the jazz language, right? So we want to be learning language, right? I mean, in that Sweet Georgia Brown study, there is some licks that are listed out. But if you're in the Jazz Standards Club and you're looking at any sort of, it could be a 2-5-1 and you're actually learning the changes. But if you're finding a static chord there, find a lick there that's going to work, or find a lick off of a recording and learn that. Like, we'll learn that lick. It's kind of a simple idea when I'm saying it. Like, it's like, right? I know I just improvised something random there, but it could be, right, something like that. It could be, right? That's more of a bluesy kind of a thing, right? So learn licks, learn jazz language to reveal what you should play, right? I mean, and honestly, that is really the best way to learn jazz, is learn the language of jazz, right? By just simply like copying what other people have done. And over time, that language becomes clear to you and more natural on your instrument, right? And when you have tools like scales where you can kind of connect the dots a little bit, like sometimes we need that, right? Like sometimes it's not enough to be like, hey, just learn, licks and stuff off of a record, right? That kind of leaves a lot of us unsatisfied. Well, that's where scales can step in and really help out. And I didn't mention like just the fundamental here really quick, which is like chord tones, right? And I know sometimes that can be an unsatisfying answer. It's like, well, what do you play if you're on a D7 for a million years, right? Well, those are the chord tones. So if you don't know what to play, know that you are safe with the chord tones. Like, you are at home. That is your home. The chord tones are your home, and then you can experiment with those chord tones like I just did right there, right? I just did a half step into the third, did a half step into the fifth there, just did a half step into the seventh, so to the octave, the root. Now I just connected it chromatically there. Yeah, that was a lot of chromaticism, right? Or I could go, we call them approach tones, right? So we're going enclosures, right? Right. So if you're always resolving to those chord tones, this doesn't necessarily only apply to playing the changes. If you are always playing around those chord tones inside and outside and resolving back to them, man, you can get away with a lot. You can get away with a lot. You can get away with not knowing jazz language very well. You can get away with not really even knowing what the scales to play are. as long as you're dancing around those chord tones and resolving back to them. And you can call that the secret to jazz. I mean, I always joke around about that. Like, what is the secret to jazz? Well, that might be it, actually, is can you resolve to the chord tones, right? Can you resolve to the chord tones? If you can resolve to the chord tones, you're going to already kind of sound like a somewhat competent improviser. Okay. All right. That was hopefully a very thorough answer to that question. Let's go to the next question. This is another question that was asked ahead of time by Benzabang. I will get your questions in the chat, by the way, guys. So hang on in there. This one is blues heads just slip my mind into a blob. Blue Monk, Tenor Madness, things ain't what they used to be. Any thoughts for somehow remembering these better? I am good at remembering melodies for tunes I sing vocals to. Well, this is a really easy answer because the answer to this question is literally I'm good at remembering the melodies I sing vocals to. So this could be specific to Benzabang, where it's like knowing the lyrics or singing lyrics is particularly helpful, right? Because they're a singer. I know Benzabang sings and he plays guitar. But this really goes for anybody, even if you're the worst singer in the planet, is there's something about the human brain and connecting melodies with words, right? And so sometimes for these blues heads or just jazz standards in general, a lot of times actually, there's lyrics, right? There are actual lyrics that are predefined, but if you wanted to, you could throw those out entirely. Or if there are no lyrics, you can make up your own lyrics to any of these songs, right? Let's see. Am I creative today? So like, right? So that's Tenor Madness. So like, so went to the store, bought a few grapes, went to the counter and they told me too late. Or whoops, went to the counter and they told me too late. There we go. So too late. What's the rest of that story? Maybe, they closed and, I didn't get there before the store closed. I don't know where I was going with that, but you see what I'm saying? Like it's even kind of silly, the lyrics I'm coming up with. And so that there is a great way, not only to remember blues melodies, but really any melodies, just put lyrics to it. And I suppose maybe like pro tip is like, if you put lyrics that you've created yourself and they're kind of, I don't know, unique or odd, right? Like our brains remember odd associations with things. It's just a scientific fact. It's scientifically studied. Don't ask me to point to the research, but I know I've read it somewhere. And at least it certainly works for me. So that's one great way to do it. I think that's honestly the answer to the question is right there. That's how to differentiate them. Or take mental pictures sometimes of the melodies. Like sometimes some of us play like very visual instruments, like guitar, I think is a very visual instrument. So sometimes like mental pictures of shapes, I think sometimes can help depending on what instrument you play or how your instrument feels to you. Let me drink some sparkling water. My daughter gave me a straw that doesn't actually go all the way down, but I appreciate it anyways. Okay. Let's go to another question asked ahead of time, and then I will actually, if you guys don't mind, let me bust out. There's 4 questions asked ahead of time, and I just I'm going to go through them so I don't. Sometimes what happens is I forget to answer all of them that are asked ahead of time. Now, this one sounds actually a little bit similar to our one that we talked about with Benzabang. Let's see if there's another take here. Some of the best advice I've gotten from you is to play the changes when I'm playing over a one chord form. I run out of ideas and revert to a single scale with some chromaticism. How do I transfer what I've learned playing over changes to that context? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, so the question is basically kind of the same as like, hey, what do I play over static chords? you know, because like, again, I made the scale idea, and I even showed how you can add chromaticism to scales, right? And that's one way to play over these, you know, static chords like that dominant seventh or that minor seventh. But the answer to that question, which is how do I transfer what I learned from playing over changes to that context, is the same language still applies, right? When you're playing 2-5-1 chord progressions, right? You are, when you really analyze the language that you're learning, right? Whether it be from like the etudes that we learn in the Jazz Standards Club, or off of a record like Freddie Hubbard or Bill Evans, whoever's playing, if you really analyze what they're doing, again, they're oftentimes melodically resolving two chord tones, right? So that could be adding a tension, like, you know, making that dominant seventh, you know, here's my pet lick, right? So like dominant seven, nice lick for dominant sevenths, by the way, right? Resolving. And they're resolving, right? That one goes, oops, right? So very outside, still outside, but then it resolves to the third on the G major seven, the one chord, right? Those ideas still apply though, right? Because you can create tension, again, resolving to those chord tones. And all the language that you're learning of playing the changes is still kind of, they're going to see the same concepts that you can play over top of those static chords. Like I was talking about the approach tones, right? Right? All that. Right? That's over a dominant seventh chord. I'm just surrounding the third, surrounding the seventh. Right? So you can play all that stuff and apply all of the same stuff you're learning in the changes to those static chords. It's all the same in my mind. But I understand that it feels different. I get that it feels different. So I understand the context of the question. But everything that you're learning still applies, right? And then there's the scales, learning the scales. The licks that we talked about. Here's the last question asked ahead of time by Sean Wayland. When good jazz players do quick runs in a solo, do they pre-plan to run a scale? Should I be thinking, here comes a 2-5, I am going to play a Dorian scale over it? So here, the answer to this is like, well, you know, some of the most proficient, amazing improvisers ever are doing a lot less thinking than that, right? If we're just talking about the highest level of playing here, they're not probably not necessarily thinking like, I'm going to play the Dorian here, or, you know, I'm going to play this thing or this thing here now. What you're talking about is just, you know, many years and hours of muscle memory and, you know, music playing in their head that's coming out, right? And I certainly can speak to that a little bit, right? Like I can speak to some of that, right? Feeling that natural ability to improvise. But I'm talking about like the highest levels of improvisers are not doing that much thinking. The answer, though, is in my mind, the answer in my mind is there's not really a wrong answer there, right? If you want to play a fast line and like, you know, here's the Dorian and like, those you going, I don't know if that's, you know, is that a fast line, or I guess playing it in context is important. So you could definitely think about that, like tonal centers and like things are going by quickly and just play quickly through the scale, or it could be a preordained pattern that you're used to playing, or like, you know, I just played for you guys my pet lick there, right? I can play that really fast, right? Right, that's the dominant seventh to the one. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You know, in general, you'll hear me say, don't copy and paste licks, or at least don't make that in your intention. But sometimes if you're in context, when you're playing something very quickly, you might just naturally want to go to that. Or maybe at first, before you just naturally want to play, you have your own vocabulary that you just naturally want to play spontaneously, then you might think about playing that at first. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, right? We're trying to get to an end result here. And the more musical you get, the more vocab you acquire, the more context you play in, the better you get at improvising, really. The less it becomes a question of what do I think about when I play a fast run? And it'll be more just like playing a fast run is just an extension of the other improvisation I was already doing. Hopefully that makes sense. Cool. All right. So that were the questions asked ahead of time. got that off our chest here. I enjoyed those questions. Those are really good. Let's go back in the live chat. So, hello, live chat. I'm here for you. Let's go to the first question here, and that was from Carrie Russell. Carrie Russell said, pentatonic scales, when to use in improv. When to use in improv. So first, I'll just kind of start by pointing you to a couple resources. Let me look for them really quick. One of them you can find in the inner circle proper, and that would be Zero to Improv. You're going to find a chapter in there that talks about pentatonic scales and all the different applications, right? That you can apply pentatonic scales to, the different kinds of chords that you can play it to. I can show you a few ideas today, just to get us started here. And then I'm trying to, one of our jazz workshops, which they're not included in the inner circle, they're over and above, but I know a lot of you have them. You can also purchase them, by the way, if you go to your courses section of your of the inner circle. There it is. Okay, so there's one called Jazz Theory Breakthrough. It's one of our workshops, and there is a masterclass in there called Pentatonic Power: 10 Ways to Use Pentatonic Scales in Jazz Improv. And James Milton, who's a fantastic guitar player, teaches that one, and he does a really good job of explaining uses of pentatonic scales. That's not just for guitar players, by the way. He just happens to be a guitar player like me teaching it, but it's for everybody. So those are just some resources I would point out to you first. Aside from that, let's just go over some of the obvious, right? So if we're playing a blues, right, I think a lot of us know that the pentatonics work really well. So if I'm playing a B flat minor, a B flat blues, I can play a B flat minor pentatonic scale, or a B flat major pentatonic scale, right? To get sort of sounds and or mixing and matching those two, like that iconic lick. Right? We've all heard that. Right? That comes from a mixture, really, of the minor and major pentatonic scale, right? So that's marrying two scales with actual jazz language. Cool, right? That's kind of how this kind of stuff kind of works or comes together if you think about it this way. Okay, so there's the blues, right? If you got a static minor seventh chord, for example, right? We talked about those static chords today. Well, right, we can play minor pentatonic ideas over a static minor seventh chord. And again, I'm not going to go over like every single application of the minor pentatonic today or the major pentatonics, but these would just give you a few ideas here. The one that I always like to show off as far as like, let's get everybody a really cool idea of like how you can actually use minor pentatonic scales is if we have like a 2-5-1. And I should mention, I learned this from the late great Vic Juris, who is one of my teachers who I study with. If you have a 2-5-1 in C major, a D minor 7, a G7, and a C major 7, right? So our D minor 7, we could start with an A minor pentatonic scale. I hope you could hear that the A minor pentatonic scale does not sound offensive to a D minor 7, right? Okay, so you can think of that as like playing the fifth away from the chord that you want to play. So A minor pentatonic scale over the D minor. Then we get to the G7, the 5 chord. Go up a half step to B flat and play B flat minor pentatonic. Now this sounds really out, but like listen to a G7 altered chord really quick. Hear that? Okay, G7 altered. Right? You can kind of hear that there's a lot of those altered notes in the G7 altered chord, right? So the flat 9s and the sharp 11s and the flat 13s and the did I say flat 9, sharp 9? Right, all of those, right? All of those are actually in the B flat minor pentatonic, right? And that's pretty easy to remember because it's just A minor pentatonic over D minor, B flat minor pentatonic over G7. And then for the one chord, we get to the C major, move up just a half step, and now we're at B, okay? We can play the B minor pentatonic. Okay, now what does that do? Okay, that actually plays a C major 7 sharp 11, right? Which is an acceptable extension that you can play on top of the major 7th chord, right? And that B minor pentatonic is a great sound, right? Right, sounds really good. Right, so it outlines that sort of a sound. So in totality, the pentatonics are A minor over the D, B flat minor pentatonic over the G, the 5 chord, and then B major pentatonic over the 1 chord, the C, right? And so D minor 7, and then G7, and then C major 7. Right? That's pretty cool, right? So that just kind of gives you a hint into the power of pentatonic scales and thinking about those as mechanisms for improvising, okay? Hopefully that gives people something to think about there. But again, I gave you some other resources that can dive a little bit deeper. I would say, like, again, in the inner circle, there's a rate like 0 to improv. There is a section of a chapter on scales where it talks about pentatonics. Okay. Or that workshop, Jazz Theory Breakthrough, has a really good masterclass on that. Okay, moving on along. Isabel, question about love for sale. Don't understand what the meaning of this expression modal interchange is in the chords analysis. First bars 8 and then 53 through 60. Let me, just so I can make sure I am crystal clear on, I'm getting the and I might pull it up on the screen too. So give me 1 second just to do that. Where's love for sale? There it is. Getting it pulled up here. I just want to make sure we can reference our materials here and look at them together. There's our color-coded chords analysis. Took me a second there. Yes, I know what we're talking about now. Okay, so first, love for sale. Present my screen here. Let's see. You know, they changed my. I'm gonna skip putting it on the screen for now. They changed my my software I use. They like changed it. You know, sometimes they change tech on you, and then you log in, and you're like, "Why does everything look different?" And you're like, "I don't know where to find the things that I normally was able to find," kind of a thing. Yeah. All right. So that's okay. I can just sort of speak to the material anyway. So with love for sale, right? We have E flat major 7 to B flat minor 7, right? E flat major 7 to B flat minor 7. And it notes that, you know, E flat major 7 is what's called modal interchange. So E flat major 7 is being called the 4 chord, while B minor 7 is being called the 1 chord, right? So if B flat minor 7 is the 1 chord, right? If we're calling, which this is kind of a tricky tune, by the way, because it kind of flirts in the second A section. Now all of a sudden we're kind of in the key of B flat major now. It's a weird song to call that you're really in just one key. But in that first section, the first A section, those first 16 bars, we're in the key of B flat minor, right? So B flat minor, if we're thinking about what the actual 4 chord is of B flat minor, right? Move this so the guitar players can see my hand in case they want to. So B flat minor is the 1 chord. What's the 4 chord of B flat minor, right? Well, we know from harmonizing natural melodic and harmonic minor scales. If you don't know how to do that, 0 to improv. Or Roman numeral analysis 101 in your courses. The 4 chord is E flat minor 7, right? So B flat minor 7, the 1, E flat minor 7 is the 4 chord, right? But that's not what we have in Love for Sale. We have a major 7 chord. So an E flat major 7 going to B flat minor, right? It creates that really cool sound, right? And it makes you confused as to what key you're in at all. So modal interchange is when you're essentially just borrowing from the parallel key, right? You're borrowing from a different modal center, right? And so E flat major is, in the major tonality, the B flat major tonality. So therefore, since it's in the major tonality, we call it modal interchange. Now, I believe in the training video that Brett did explain what modal interchange is, but that's the basics of it. It's basically we're just borrowing from the parallel key, which again, the parallel keys here would be B flat minor or B flat major, right? And when you mix them together, a way to explain all this madness is it's modal interchange, right? Because what when we teach things, I don't think that I doubt that, is it Cole Porter who did Love for Sale? I doubt that he was thinking, hey, I think that, we should add some modal interchange in here. He just was probably like coming up with like some stuff and he's like, oh, that kind of sounds cool to go there, right? Instead, I bet you that's kind of what happened. I don't really know his mind. But when we're teaching things, we put funny names to them like modal interchange and stuff like that, just so that you can kind of make sense a little bit of what's happening, right? And helps you learn things when you put a name to things, right? Okay, hopefully that was clear-ish. Renee, Brent, when you play quarter notes on guitar, you prefer to play the string up or down, and why? I never even thought about that. So definitely down. Yeah, I definitely pick down. I think to me, it feels the most efficient, right? If I'm going, I guess that wouldn't be efficient for some people, but like the alternate picking. Yeah, for me, I just don't play that way. And when it comes to like strumming and picking, this is again, like for the horn players out there, bear with us here for a second. But when it comes to strumming and picking, there's obviously like very varying different styles of picking. Economy picking, the whole alternate picking thing. And I think it was Gilad Hexelman I heard once say, or a friend told me that he said, that like fingering isn't as important unless it hinders you from playing what you want to play. Like if you diagnose that the reason you're technically unable to play something, and that's because what your right hand is doing is not efficient or it doesn't really work, that's when to be concerned about it. Otherwise, like consider the fact that, if it's getting you to do the job, it could actually be playing into your sound and your tone and the way that you're expressing the music, the way you strum. So I think downstrokes is just what I navigate to, and I think it works for me. Niall, I'm currently working through the Jazz Guitar Accelerator course. And module 1, there are a lot of different modes, arpeggios, positions, which we're advised to learn to play. A bit overwhelming. To what extent should we learn all these off by heart before moving on to the next sections, or can we continue on with other sections while revisiting these later? Great. This is a fantastic question. And so again, I know that this is a guitar question, but everybody pay attention here, horn players, piano players, everybody, because the advice I'm about to give is universal to every instrument or any course or anything that you're ever practicing ever. Okay. And that is this. There's a couple rules. Rule number one is practice something until you're not having fun doing it anymore. Okay. I'm not having fun doing this anymore. Like you get to this point where you're thinking about practicing and it feels dull, right? And you're like, I don't feel like doing this. And yes, I get that like there's certain things that you need to practice that are inherently not as exciting as other things, right? Particularly the stuff that Niall's talking about, which is like, stuff about like learning how to play your instrument. Well, sometimes like doing that there is some cumbersomeness to it. And that's why you should probably do those things in small doses and not large doses, right? So, and do the stuff for as long as you're excited about doing it. But then when you aren't excited about doing it, it doesn't mean that you should never work on it ever again. It just means that maybe you should stop doing it for now and move on to something else. Okay. And that goes for like not only if you're bored, but if you're overly frustrated. So if you're ever overly frustrated with a song you're working on or a solo you're working on, to the point where, again, you're not looking forward to practicing, that's a good sign to move on to something else. I guess the third rule or the second rule or the third rule, whatever we're at right now, is to practice something until like you feel like you have a degree of confidence playing it, right? So like if you just can't play, you're trying to learn this lick in all 12 keys and you just absolutely can't play it, then and rules number 1 and 2 don't apply yet, then you probably should keep working on it, right? So that like, again, you're walking away from the situation having been able to play this thing and unlocking some new ground in your musicality, right? That's important, right? And then I would say the fourth rule is like, don't ever work on something for way too long, even if you're still enjoying it, or even if you still don't have it yet, right? Because ultimately, like this goes to this especially is true about learning songs, right? You will never truly master a song, right? You just will. I have personally never mastered a jazz standard, and I'm almost willing to bet that like some of the masters that we consider masters, we would say they've mastered, but I bet you in their head they don't think that they've mastered it, right? So you always have to look at everything that you're working on and learning as a stepping stone to something else, and realizing the big picture that everything you do practice applies to other things. Even if you're just working on scales that are boring and like you're just working on your technique, or at least you've told yourself, I'm just working on my technique. Well, you might be working on your phrasing at the same time. You might be working on your rhythm at the same time. Like everything applies to everything, right? So there's no really like one musical task that we're doing that is not useful to almost every other area of musicality, right? So you want to keep moving, right? I mean, forward momentum is a feeling of progress, and a feeling of progress and feeling like you're always excited to do the next thing. That's how you stay long-term motivated to play. And like loss of motivation is the number one killer of musical progress, right? I think we all know that. So we want to be aware of that. And that's how I sort of judge when I'm done working on musical material. I'm currently working on a song it's not jazz. It's a different style of music. I'm working on a song right now. It's very difficult. I'm very excited to learn it. I'm going through the time to learn it by ear, do all the things. And my goal is to learn the whole song, but it's very difficult. So if at any point I'm going like, you know what, I'm really tired of doing this, that's not a failure. It's just a sign to say like, okay, it's time to move on to the next thing because I learned a lot from this one, right? Okay, or at least I reached part of my goal, right? So keeping all that in mind. Can you talk about the Lydian dominant usage? Yes, Lydian dominant usage. Okay, so the basics of Lydian dominant, right, is like, okay, we talked about the Mixolydian scale. Let's go back to our D7 scale for a second, right? All right, so our Mixolydian is basically like playing a major scale, but with a flatted seventh, right? And that's the scale you play over a dominant seventh chord, right? Now, if you make it a Lydian dominant scale, right? Now what we're going to do is essentially sharp the fourth. So you hear the sound, right? Has that kind of, I guess you call it mysterious sound. And really what that's actually doing is it's playing this sound. Okay, that's a D7 sharp 11. So to me, Lydian dominant, like if someone were to say that scale, that's the chord you're playing that over top of. But keep in mind too, like, I mean, this is another great example of like, when we're on a static chord, like a D7, let's say we're playing rhythm changes and those chords last for 2 bars each. There's no rule saying that we can't alter the chord. I mean, this is jazz, for goodness sake, right? So we can was trying to do that. So we can alter that chord. So Lydian dominant is another good scale structure or note sequence that you could think about for, again, if you're trying to alter that chord to sharp 11 and create some color, create some more movement. So Lydian dominant works really well for dominant 7 sharp 11 chords. Any tips for getting that outside pentatonic sound that McCoy Tyner plays? I kind of actually gave that a little bit earlier. Again, I'm not a piano player, so I can only speak to like the basics of using a scale like that, right? But McCoy Tyner, like, and I'm not very good at if I'm being completely honest with you, I'm not very good at pentatonic patterns, right? But like, right, McCoy Tyner's playing a lot of patterny stuff, right? So I would need to practice that, like getting good at playing patterns within the pentatonic scales, but then, right, like, right, I think McCoy Tyner is always like shifting the pentatonics, right, like chromatically, right? So he's playing that outside sound by like just that was, again, I need some practice on this, but that was something. So like just simply going like, okay, let's go outside of like a half step or down a half step, go outside a little bit, but then go back to home base again, which again, if you think about it, that's the same concept I've been talking about with quote unquote the secret to jazz, chord tones, right? Feel free to go outside the chord tones. Feel free to play every alteration. Feel free to like go out into outer space. Just return back home to a solid chord tone or a solid tonal center, and you're going to sound like a hero, right? I mean, now again, if there's method to the madness, like playing like great patterns and motivic ideas that like make musical sense rather than just random notes, of course, then you're going to sound like a mature improviser, which is, again, is why like I'm like, oh, well, I don't really know a lot of pentatonic patterns. I guess I haven't really practiced that very much, right? So I would need to work on that kind of stuff if I wanted to sound convincing doing that sort of thing. Hopefully that answers your question. That's a great question. It's a really good question. Any tip, Antoine asks, any tip to help transcribe into another key when it comes to melodies or licks? I get the logic of it, and as much as it's doable when it comes to chords, it's hard when I must transcribe licks. Thanks for the great resources. Yes, of course. Okay, so transcribing into another key when it comes to melodies or licks. Got you. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Again, let me just speak for a second to those who are the visual instruments, right? Again, guitar is a super visual pattern-based instrument, right? So if I learn in C major this lick right here, right? Well, every guitar player is going to understand this perfectly well, right? And again, Antoine, I don't know what you play, but just bear with me here. And I can relate even that lick to the chord, right? Or whatever voicing I want, honestly. Last note ends on that voicing there, right? Well, if I play then F, I mean, that's where the guitar can really shine, right? Is like, there's a lot of things that are very hard about playing guitar, as there are every instrument, but that's not one of them, right? So use your instrument however you can, right? The guitar, I made an example easily there, but use your instrument however you can to help you make those connections. Then there's always the good old, like, hey, what's the chord that this lick or this melody starts on? And what's the note it starts on? So there's C, right? So I'm starting on the 5th, which is G. Right? So if I'm playing in, let's do E flat major now. So then I can go starting on the 5th, which is B flat. So there's always that, right? Just putting a scale tone or whatever it happens to be in connection to the chord that it's being played under. Let me make sure I got to the heart of your question there. it could be hard, right? And that's why there is a practice of all 12 keys, right? It doesn't exist because it's necessarily obvious, right? It exists because, like, if there's a piece of musical information you really want to know really well, the advice is to take it into all 12 keys, because you might not be able to automatically do it on your own, right? Or you might not be there yet, or even if you are a very advanced musician, that might not come naturally to you. So having the flexibility to play that lick in all 12 keys, taking the time to do what I just did, essentially, right? Until every one of those keys becomes natural to you, it's worth the time. I think it's worth the time. I'll say 85% of the time, it's worth the time. Okay. 85% of the time, it's worth the time going through that process. And those are the two ways I can think off the top of my head that makes this whole thing easier. There's always putting it in notation software. If you're a good reader and like hitting the transpose button, right? You could always do that. I mean, it's incredible the kind of like software that's also available to you. Like I was just using, I've been using this program called Moises, which to me is like the next level of slowdowners, because what it does is you can like put a track into it, right? Any MP3 that you have. And then it'll create stems of all the instruments. So a stem is like those individual instruments. And then you can literally mix it however you want. So if I'm trying to learn guitar parts, for example, I can like keep the drums on, but like turn everything else off and just have the guitar on, and I can hear the guitar very clearly. I was even thinking about this, like this got to be really great for bass players, right? To hear those bass lines. And then of course it has a slowdown feature where you can slow it down, but then it has a feature where you can change the key too, right? So, I mean, you could literally, like, if you're learning an idea off of a recording, you could extract just a section there and transpose it. And, if you want to hear it in its natural form, and that's easier for you to do, there you go. There's another way. Okay. Next question. Carrie Russell, when you, piano or guitar, substitute a bunch of chord changes into a previously static chord when playing in a group for use in your own solo improv, how does the bass player know what to play? Yeah, that's a good question. And so when we're talking about improvising and with musicians, with like other musicians, right? How do I say this? Like the more competent competent, I don't mean like there's people that are incompetent and therefore, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way at all. I just mean the more like competent about jazz or like chord changes and repertoire the people you're playing with are, the more likely it is that they're going to pick up on something that you're doing, right? A great example of this is like if you're playing a blues, right? Right, you're playing a blues, but then if all of a sudden you start hearing like the piano player going, okay, what did they just do there? Well, maybe some of you know the answer to that, right? You're playing the blues, a chorus of a blues, everything's going fine, you're just playing bluesy stuff, but then all of a sudden they go into this like what seems like completely different changes, right? Well, if you know what a bird blues is, or a Charlie Parker blues, right, aka like blues for Alice, excuse me, if you know those changes, the bass player might like just hear that and be like, oh, we're playing a bird blues now, and then pick up wherever you are and continue the bird blues. But the people in the band would have to know that, right? If you're playing like a bunch of alterations, for example, and like a horn player is playing the alterations, for example, well, it's the piano player may or may not pick up on that and play them, or they might hear that you're really playing Lydian dominant stuff and they'll play a sharp 11 on the chord, right? If you're choosing to add a 2 in front of dominant static chord, maybe the bass player would be able to hear that. Otherwise, they're not gonna play it, right? And so I think in general, when you're substituting chord changes, like just be thoughtful, right? Just be thoughtful. Like the improviser can do a lot more chord substitution stuff. Because again, like you could like improvise chord substitutions and the rest of the band is playing just the regular chords. But remember what I've been talking about this whole stream is like, if you are playing outside, right, which would sound outside to people, but you're resolving back home, then you're always going to sound like, as long as it resolves, it's going to sound semi good, right? So in that particular case, right, it's okay. The bass player, again, like the bass player may or may not follow you if you're a comping instrument, and it just kind of depends on how they are. Or you would just tell them ahead of time, like, hey, by the way, during this section, I really like to play this and this, and they'd be like, okay, and that's what you would play. So that's kind of how that would work, Gary. Sean, I hope you were there for the answer to your question. Jordan Whitaker, some vocab ideas work great over some instruments more than others, at least to me. Is there any tips about learning into our instrument's strengths during improv? Example, piano versus a bass solo. Okay, so works great over some instruments more than others. Leaning into our, is there any tips about leaning into our instrument strength during improv, piano versus bass solo? Okay, well, sorry, Jordan, I think I understand the essence of your question. Like, so yeah, I mean, this is an obvious true thing. Like, right, if I'm learning saxophone lines, I'm a guitar player, right? And if I'm learning like tenor sax lines, right, there are certain things that are just like very natural for a saxophonist to play that may not be so natural for a guitar player to play, or it wouldn't be the first thing I'd be able to do, right? And you know, this goes for, you know, really any instrument. Like I know that like I've heard horn players say, well, this was, you know, this is a guitar solo and it's kind of hard for me to play some of these things because it's the way a guitar player would play it. But, you know, here's the thing, like, just to be clear, and I'm not saying you're saying this, Jordan, I just want to put this out there though. Like, that is no excuse not to learn jazz from other instruments, right? In fact, the most jazz language I've ever learned is not from guitar players. The most jazz language I've learned is from piano players, sax players, trumpet players, and a bunch of other instruments too, right? Like when I was really doing a lot of studying and transcribing and stuff like that, that's what I was doing, right? And what that does is it like, it helps you learn the language, because like sometimes there's certain things about jazz language are indeed not as natural on any instrument, because some of that language like comes from horn players, or some of that language comes from piano players, right? That came about and it all evolved together. So you have to learn that stuff, and you have to work on adopting some of that to your playing. But to Jordan's point, like sometimes the stuff that just comes most natural to you when you play is going to be the stuff that's more likely to come out for you. And as far as tips goes, it's more like kind of like just keeping a note of like, what do you gravitate to? Like, what do you gravitate to playing, right? What feels comfortable for you to play, right? And then just like playing, right? I mean, I know that's kind of the advice isn't, there's not like a particular clear cut set of advice I'm giving you here, but it's more so just about like exactly what you're suggesting, like lean into it, like don't not lean into it, but then don't also ignore like the fact that just because something's hard for you to play now doesn't mean it won't become natural later, even if it's another instrument, right? And certainly you can learn a lot from them. So lean into both is what I say, right? Like lean into what's comfortable for you. Learn solos, like bass solos, right? Too, right? Like learn the way bass players would approach something, but also learn the way that a piano player might play something too, right? And then when you're marrying all that together, you're creating your own sound. You're opening up your abilities on your instrument. You're not just playing what all the other bass players are playing, and you're playing what you're playing really good jazz language, and you're playing language that sounds like it works for you. And so I guess I would just say embrace all of it. Glenn, I'm working through blues accelerator, minor blues accelerator, zero to improv in that order. Would it be better to learn jazz tunes instead? It's Okay, so it's a bit of a tough question to answer in the sense where I'm always all about like work on what's like what you need right now, right? Blues Accelerator is really good, and Minor Blues Accelerator is really good, but those are like very extensive courses, right? That it could take you like 3 to 5 months just to do one of those courses, which is great because I think if you actually complete those courses, you're going to be a lot better off. But I would encourage you to like allow your like learning tunes to me is the pinnacle, right? Learning tunes is like the standard. Like if you want to improve every single month, learn more songs. It is kind of that simple. So what I'd encourage you to do is just, you don't necessarily have to complete all of those in that order. Like you could learn Blues Accelerator and learn some tunes, or you could be working on a tune and Blues Accelerator, or just, halfway through Blues Accelerator, take a break and learn a song and then work on the rest of it. So I think you could do that. I guess my advice is like put songs into the mix. Like I know you're learning songs in Blues Accelerator, Minor Blues Accelerator, not so much zero to improv so much. That's more of like a jazz theory kind of a thing. In fact, if anything, excuse me, zero to improv, I would say would be like really good for like just going through that and like going like, oh yeah, scales. Like I should learn some more scales, or like, hey, playing like changes. Like how do I do that? Or hey, what's a concept I can grab from zero to improv? Like zero to improv would be a better one you could cherry pick from, right? So I don't know that I would only think about doing these in order. I would definitely think about adding songs into the diet, if you will. On fire today. Thank you so much, Benzabang. I appreciate it. Playing over rhythm changes, excluding the bridge, it feels like that works is just playing in the tonic major with lots of chromaticism, but where the chromatics happen is crucial, correct? I mean, right. I mean, so I mean, if I took what you said literally, Todd, right? So it's like, right? Then we could be like, right? I'm just playing chromatically. See, I even messed up there. I was just trying to play chromatics, but then I actually resolved to the chord tones, which is what I was about to get to. So just playing like B flat major chromatically it's going to sound like you're playing notes, right? And it's probably not going to sound offensive unless you don't resolve, right? So you could get away with like B flat major, skip the 6, skip the 2, skip the 5, skip the 1, or not skip the 1, then resolve to the 1 playing chromatics, right? So you could go like, all right, this would be helpful if I was a piano player, like, because then I could be playing the chords in the left hand and the soloing in the right hand. All the limitations of the guitar, but the beauty of it as well. So you could do that, right? But then it's like, well, what about like, right? You heard the changes there, right? So, okay, so you could clearly hear me resolving to chord tones, hitting altered chord tones, and then resolving to other ones. So for me, when we're talking about learning rhythm changes, like rhythm changes, we have a whole course on rhythm changes accelerator, right? Because like it is very difficult song form, like especially those A sections, right? So you are correct in saying that it does matter where the chromatics happen, but I think it more matters when you're resolving to the chord tones is what really matters to make it sound convincing. Keeping in mind that you don't always have to resolve and play every single chord change into the rhythm changes, right? You don't always have to do that. Maybe sometimes you're just playing the 5-1, sometimes you're playing the 1-6, and then the 5. Like you don't always have to play every change, especially when they're going by that fast. But this is where, like, again, some good old fashioned getting on getting on and learning some licks and some ideas, or even in the Jazz Standards Club, go to the Olio study and find the etude there and just start cherry picking some licks and lines that you can play. And then when you're getting some of that language, like, sure, think about the B flat major scale with chromatics, but then you're adding more to your vocabulary there when you're thinking about like some of these licks and language that you're learning. So yeah, it's a tricky one talking about rhythm changes because it really is kind of tricky. It goes by really quickly. So it can be a little bit tricky. Carrie, 251 pentatonic progression is helpful. Thanks. Yes. Cool little trick. Everybody loves little tricks, right? It's a good one. How to remember the changes of jazz standards. I want to play from memory. The first place is like, the more you're able to learn the changes by ear, the better, right? Now, I understand that is not realistic for very many people. You're just not there yet. And so, but I assure you, like, when you learn things by ear, primarily, and this is why we really stress this on the melodies, right? When you learn things by ear primarily, you're just putting more work into it, and so you're spending more time doing it than reading it from sheet music. But you are you're triggering that oral understanding of what these sounds are that you're hearing, right? So learning by ear does help, but I understand completely that that's not realistic for a lot of people. It's really, really helpful that when you are able to understand how the harmony works. The reason why we have chords analysis in every single jazz standard study is because if you're able to like just go like, autumn leaves, 2-5-1 to the relative major, 2-5-1 to the parent minor. I just told you how to play the song. Like, I could go up and say, hey, let's play this song. It's you're going to play, it revolves around B flat major, and then you're going to want to go to, that's the relative, major, and then you're going to want to go to G minor. Or I didn't have to say any of that. I could just say, hey, the two key centers are B flat major and then G minor, and you just approach them by 2-5-1s. Just sit back and you'll listen to what me and the bass player are doing or whatever, and you'll get it, right? Then as long as you know what a 2-5-1 is in B flat major and a 2-5-1 is in G minor, then you're golden. And if you don't know what those are, learn autumn leaves, right? and then you got it, right? So it's important that you understand and put names to chord progressions, and you simplify songs by breaking them up into sections, both chord progressions and actual sections, right? Or even important sections. Oftentimes the color coding we do in our chords analysis in the Jazz Standards Club, or even in the playbooks that we have, they're color coded in such a way that it would help you memorize the song. So that's one. Then of course it's just, repetition, right? Playing those songs a lot will help you remember it. If you're stuck in front of sheet music and you're still just looking at the changes on sheet music or a chord chart, like, you have to eventually take away that chord chart and start playing without it, right? So that you're not relying on your eyes, you're relying on your memory, you're relying on your ears more. And then I think, you're going to remember changes to jazz standards better, the better you're able to hear chord progressions, in my opinion. So that's why, like, I always say, learn more songs, because the more times you hear a 2-5-1 or a 1-6-2-5-1, about 10 songs in, you'll hear a song you're going to learn and you'll be like, that's a 2-5-1. I just need to know what key it's in, right? That's what happens. And that's how, like, really seasoned musicians are sometimes able to get up on stage, not really know a song, but pick it up by ear pretty quickly, is because they just have they hear the patterns, the chordal patterns really well. So that's really my best advice for getting off the page and playing by memory. What is the difference between dyads and double stops? I'm thinking in regards to the piano. I have to be honest, Timothy, I actually don't know. It's such a piano question that I don't think I really have a good answer to it. So what you should do, Timothy, is go to the Inner Circle community and ask that question in the community. I bet you there's going to be some piano players there that know the answer to that. Okay. I apologize. I don't know the answer to that. Serge. Okay, but you get lost. Ebony Vice. Let's go back to your original question, Serge. When you improvise things with chords, I never get lost, but when I try to improvise on the progression, forgetting the chords, I find it better. So in other words, you're able to improvise better, but you often get lost. Do you have any advice? One thing is like when you're practicing, you can practice looping sections, right? So instead of like practicing like the entire song, practice like the first 16 bars or the first 8 bars and just loop that over and over again. And see if that doesn't help you stop getting lost when you're improvising. It's like you're just dealing with less musical information, and maybe that's going to help you get less lost. There's always the old trick of like thinking about the melody while you're doing it, but that's not always so easy either, right? So try that. Try looping different sections, smaller sections, and then like after that first 8 bars or 16 bars, go to the next section and loop that until you feel like you're not getting lost. And then the next one, and then start improvising through the whole song and see if that helps, right? In general. That way you can get that freedom that you're looking for. But also, you're not getting lost, right? Which is important. And also sometimes when you're getting lost, you're playing with a band. Like if you are playing with a band, don't be afraid just to sometimes ask another musician where you're at in the song. I mean, I know it can feel embarrassing, but well, what's the point in like, your ego, like getting so, upset with all this stuff that you're not enjoying the music, right? It's okay. What specific techniques do you use to help students develop their own personal style within the jazz genre? Learn from a lot of different musicians, right? Like I talked about learning from guitar players and sax players and bass players, like learn from all of them. Don't just get stuck on one instrument that you play or is one artist that you're trying to learn music from. Be an experimenter, like experiment a lot. When transcribe yourself, like literally like record yourself frequently. And if you ever listen back and are like, I really like that, like literally learn that lick again for yourself. And maybe you would want to take in all 12 keys. You don't have to, but just be aware of the things that you're naturally doing, because the stuff that you're naturally doing yourself is part of your sound, right? It's part of the thing that you're developing. So those are some ideas that I would give. Antoine, thanks for the answer. Since I'm playing vibes, I guess I need nothing else but learning deep by repeating the exercise until it seems natural. Yeah, sometimes it's just good old, rinse and repeat, keep doing it. Yes, they did, Gary. I still do not understand the point of, I get the point of daylight savings time and that we have over here, but at the same time, I don't. I wish it would just go away and never come back. I hate daylight savings time. It does confuse things internationally as well. This is actually a good point here, Carrie. Transcribing horn solos is tough for a pianist because they play notes that are between notes we can play on the keyboard. Yes, but this is where this goes back to like developing your own sound, right? You find your own way to express what they're expressing on their horn, right? Like they might be like slurring certain things and bending notes and doing all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't really matter. Like you can still find what is the approximation of exactly what they played on my piano, right? And then it's about like, yes, trying to get as close to what they're playing so you're learning their authentic language, but then at the same time it's kind of cool because you're learning new ways of playing this information that applies to you. And so to me, then it becomes even more special. Rutledge asks, when reading sheet music not written for guitar, I've been told to play it up the octave. Why? Does that apply to all instruments being played on guitar? I'll be honest with you, Rutledge, that's a question I don't really know the answer to. I do think it has something to do with just the way the guitar, the the register that the guitar is in. I actually don't have a good answer to that question. If anybody else here has a good answer to that question, feel free to answer that. Won't be ashamed to say when I don't know the answer to a question. Seems like the one that I would want to know the answer to, though. But thanks for asking, Rutledge, and apologize on that. Okay, I think that's all the questions for today. Guys, thank you for all the great questions. This was really good. Thanks for those who are in Europe who stayed a little later today. Hope that this was helpful to everybody and that you all grabbed something here, right? Just something that you heard from somebody else's question can be valuable. As is per tradition here in the Inner Circle, I always like to announce what the next Jazz Standards Club study is. So for the month of April, we're going to be studying Afternoon in Paris. Afternoon in Paris. Great little song. This is your chance to study your 2-5-1s because this one is basically 2-5-1s in 3 different keys, right? Which is awesome. So this is one of those songs that like spend a lot of time working on it, and for sure it's going to translate to literally hundreds of other standards that you could possibly play. Okay, so that's going to be a really good one. So stay tuned for those who work in the Jazz Standards Club. Learn the new tune with us every single month for Afternoon in Paris. Coming right up here in April. All right, my friends, this has been a great Monthly Jazz Mastermind. Thank you for being here. We'll see you guys all in the inner circle, and cheers.